Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Redmen TV and a special edition of the Liverpool Transfer Podcast. My name is Dan Clubb. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by James Pearce of The Athletic, of course. James, how are you? Okay?
I'm good, thanks, Dan. Yourself?
Yeah, can't complain, mate. Massively appreciate you joining me. We're going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour around the stories thus far and potentially what could happen between now and the transfer deadline passing, of course, which in any normal year will be tonight, but of course it isn't. Friday the 31st of January. They've decided to do it on a Monday for some reason this time. We'll begin with sort of what's happened thus far and the major stories, the ones that have actually had some legs or not, as the case may be. It's been a quiet January for Liverpool, obviously. One of assessments and sort of waiting for an opportunity, it felt like, which obviously was sort of the buzzword of the summer as well. Is that the sense you've got from Liverpool, from the conversations you've had and what you've seen in terms of, like, there was no urge and sort of panic at all, really, from Liverpool's point of view to do business, but had something to come along, they might have acted?
Yeah, that was how it was explained to me before the window started, and it's been exactly how it panned out. It was Slot said himself, and I remember asking him at a press conference in early January, do you see sufficient depth in this squad to last the pace, or do you see gaps that need bolstering? And he said, well, I told you before the season started, I was happy with everything I had, and he said it would be strange if I turned around now and said anything differently. And yeah, that was the message from behind the scenes, was that there wasn't a particular area that Liverpool felt they needed to bolster. It was more a case of they're ready and waiting. If a market opportunity comes up, I suppose in a similar way to we saw previously with the Gakpo deal, and then before that the Diaz deal, where players who were kind of on their radar for further down the line suddenly became available. And then there was a decision to make about, well, if we want them, we've probably got to go now. Otherwise, you miss out. But up to this point, that hasn't been the case this time around. And I can't say I'm particularly surprised. I know obviously there's a lot of talk around kind of why they haven't, and lots of people say to me, why haven't Liverpool gone and bought another left back? And I think it's quite obvious you're not going to operate with three senior left backs for the second half of the season. Now, to me, that's just common sense. And at no point this month did I think that either Robertson or Tsimikas would be moving on. I think that, despite kind of the noise around that, I think that's a debate for the summer rather than for January.
No, absolutely. There's always a clamour, isn't there, for new signings, regardless of what position you're in. But I think a lot of the sort of the terminology used around the start of the window, and even heading into the window, really, for Liverpool fans, obviously we converse with a lot, was strengthen from position of strength, which I guess wholeheartedly. But again, when you look at the squad, I mean, in terms of clean bills of health, obviously we listened to Arne Slot this morning, like, short of Curtis Jones' fitness, Liverpool are completely ready to go with almost every senior available player, which is a remarkable position to be in at this time of year, given the congestion of fixtures and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, as recently as midweek, we had the luxury of leaving half the big hitters at home. You know what I mean? So Liverpool really are blessed in that particular department. You mentioned there sort of something maybe materialising had there been somebody they wanted for some time or had an eye on for further down the line. Kvaratskhelia falls into that category. It felt like for a moment anyway. Obviously, never materialised. He was PSG bound. What was your understanding of that situation? Because obviously it was a colleague of yours, David Ornstein, that initially brought it to our attention. Did that ever have any legs in it, or was it just Liverpool do admire him, but maybe it's just too late?
The initial story that David Ornstein wrote was certainly correct, that he's a player that Liverpool have admired for a number of years. I think back to the way he performed against Liverpool in the Champions League, and there were, sat there listening to Jurgen Klopp eulogise about how good he was. So, I think, of course, people see a bit of transfer news, especially in a month where there wasn't much going on, and like, well, no smoke without fire, it must be happening. And it was like, well, actually, if you read the initial story that David wrote, it was like he's admired by Liverpool, and they could consider it if Napoli are willing to sell, but the big caveat being it's not an area of the squad that Liverpool are actively looking to strengthen at the moment. And I just think the amount of money involved ultimately just wouldn't have made sense for Liverpool to rival PSV for his signature. And again, some people don't want to hear that, but it's when you've already got, you look at how good Gakpo has been off the left this season. Diaz, I know Slot has liked playing Diaz more centrally. I still think he's more effective from the left-hand side. And I just think with what Liverpool need to do in the summer, and of course we don't know exactly how much they need to do because so much of that is linked to the contract situations. But I just think in terms of best use of their resources, I can completely understand why they didn't think 80 million euros on him would have been a smart move. So the initial story was absolutely spot on that he was admired. Liverpool didn't hide that yes, of course he's someone that's on our radar, but no, it didn't go much further than that.
No, and as you say, when you're so well stocked, and not just well stocked, but with high performing players who operate in much the way Arne Slot would like in terms of Diaz and Gakpo, of course, and there are alternative options out there in terms of Diogo Jota and Nunez who can also do a bit from the left. We've seen Jadon Dan's out there recently too. It's like the left back situation, isn't it? Again, when you got Tsimikas and Robertson, and even a little bit of Joe Gomez as well. Like you don't need to go out and do anything crazy in that particular department. The only other one in terms of I wanted to touch on with you, James, was Stefanos Tsitsipas, I think I pronounced his name. Obviously currently on loan in Germany from PAOK, isn't it, over in Greece? He was one who kind of just emerged from the ether out of nowhere, really. Nuremberg is that, isn't it? And just like Liverpool like him, Liverpool want him, we're willing to sort of bend and flex to do this deal, but maybe not quite the case.
No, that was one that when I checked out with contacts, they were absolutely adamant that wasn't the case. I don't know whether there was an agent that potentially using Liverpool's name as a bit of gravitas in terms of creating an auction for him. But no, I was told absolutely he is not a player that we're looking to pursue. And I think when you take a step back, it's almost like, well, why would Liverpool be really? I mean, yes, his numbers are quite decent this season, but he's playing in the second division in Germany, and it wasn't a small investment, was it? I think it was like 20 to 25 million euros. So yeah, I was told absolutely no chance. I think there was some talk about Barry Hunter having even flown over there to do the deal, which in itself, Barry Hunter doesn't do deals. So it was. I was told absolutely no chance, and I don't know if a deal has been agreed for him elsewhere. I was told that Brighton were in for him, and that was probably the most likely destination for him. But no, I was told that was never a realistic one for Liverpool.
Okay, feels very bright in that deal, to be honest. In terms of major outgoings then, it's similar to the incomings really. Never particularly felt overly likely this window, it's fair to say, because again, happy with our lot. Things moving along, seamlessly is an understatement in terms of all four competitions thus far. But there was obviously a lot of murmurings around Trent. Now, that's in part due to the contract situation, of course, but it was actually prior to the window even being open. If you go back a few weeks, that Real Madrid expressed their interest and even had like sort of bids on the table and all that sort of stuff. Liverpool, of course, rebuffed it out of hand. You would have been right across that situation. How did it play out, and sort of what was the stance of Liverpool's, I guess?
Yeah, well, it was New Year's Eve, wasn't it? I think that obviously the reports first surfaced about Real Madrid actually for the first time making official contact with Liverpool and saying, right, we'd like to do a deal for January. But I was told it didn't even get as far as Liverpool discussing figures with them, because the answer was no, he is not available whatsoever in January. And then, of course, then you're kind of making further calls and thinking, well, is there a number realistically where if Real were to get to a certain point, would Liverpool be prepared to talk? But I was told no, no chance. And and again, I think it makes sense because, especially because of all the noise then against Manchester United, and of course Trent had a tough day. People were saying to me, "Oh, just take what you can and get rid of him." If he doesn't want to be there. And I thought, well, for a start, there's a huge difference between a player just having a bad game and a player throwing in the towel. And I was like, do you really think someone like Trent, who has grown up in this city and has done what he's done for Liverpool, has just given up? It's just an absolute nonsense, and also just taking the emotion out of it. You just think, well, Conor Bradley's had injury issues, and I watching him now, I still think Conor's trying to get back to where he was before. And you think how good he was against Real Madrid. So the idea that you can just get rid of Trent and play Conor Bradley for every game for the rest of the season, just absolutely crazy. So yeah, Liverpool could have banked 20-25 million this month from Real Madrid, but 25 million is nothing in the grand scheme of things if Alexander-Arnold helps Liverpool win the Premier League and potentially the Champions League as well. So yeah, despite noises from Madrid, I think at various points over January, our Real Madrid reporters have been kind of said, Madrid still think there's a chance. They still, because obviously Madrid are absolutely desperate for a right back. And I don't know whether that comes from within Madrid, almost like, well, we will get our own way kind of thing. We're Real Madrid, but I think we know as well the way Liverpool are that they're not going to get bullied by anyone. So yeah, I was probably 99% convinced on New Year's Eve that Trent was going nowhere in January, and that's exactly how it's been borne out.
Yeah, and rightfully so, in my opinion, as well. It had to be a non-starter because what Liverpool have on our own agenda, his future and all the noise around it. It was the perfect storm in a way, I guess, for Real Madrid, in terms of, obviously, there's the contract hanging over his head, that dilemma. There's also that Manchester United performance, as you mentioned, as well. And then, obviously, the transfer window opened, just like, here we go, Real Madrid rubbing their hands together, and certainly all the newspapers over there, likewise. But I'm glad, obviously, it's played out in the way that it has, and Liverpool's stance was as firm as it was. The only other major outgoing really that's been sort of muted or got as far as being a story, it feels like, James, was Darwin Nunez to Saudi. Now, this is one that sort of came and went quite quickly, but even today I've seen reports saying that there was genuine interest. It was Al Nassr, wasn't it, who were very keen. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think there was certainly some contact between Saudi and Nunez's camp. I think what I was told a few days ago, and I've not heard anything different since, unless the situation has changed, was that there hadn't been any actual bids tabled in Liverpool's direction, and that I was told even if there had been, they would have been dismissed because Liverpool, they did not think about offloading Darwin Nunez this month. Of course, the Saudis are on a big kind of recruitment drive at the minute, haven't we? We've seen that with Duran at Villa, and see Matoma at Brighton. So there's certainly interest because Nunez is a big name, isn't he? To forget the kind of ongoing debate about his suitability for Liverpool, they would have regarded that as a big coup if they could have got him. But again, I was told that Liverpool certainly weren't looking to move him on this month. Certainly they were adamant there'd been no kind of £70 million bid, I think was the story that had been rejected. Now, not even the Saudis are putting in an opening bid of 70 million for someone who, this was before, I think this was even before the Brentford game. So you kind of think, I think Darwin scored 2 Premier League goals all season. So, the idea that they're going to go in that high is a bit crazy. But yeah, Liverpool were never looking to sell this month, and Darwin himself has shown no inclination that he was looking to leave. I was told that he wants to stay and fight and prove himself. And again, I think that's a discussion for the summer, and I think it's a genuine debate there to be had. That can he do exactly what Slot wants from a number 9? Because I don't think Liverpool are going to change the way they play to necessarily completely suit him. But yeah, it would have been crazy to try and kind of engineer some kind of change on that front in January. That's one for the summer. Yeah, absolutely.
It's too big. It's too dramatic and outgoing, really. Again, given what Liverpool are doing, you don't want to unsettle that boat if you can possibly avoid it. And Darwin leaving, whatever people think of him, he's very polarising. There's definitely a conversation there, 100%. Yeah. But again, yeah, that's one for the summer. You don't accommodate. You don't even potentially talk about that now. I ironically am contractually obliged to speak to you about contracts, James, because much in the way that Vinny O'Connor asks Arne Slot every week, I need to ask you the same thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure what you're going to say here, but Arne Slot himself addressed the Mo Salah one a little bit this morning, but he said obviously he's desperate for him to stay put. He was asked about Saudi interest, but we are where we are, I guess. Has anything changed at all, Salah, Trent and Van Dijk this month?
No, not really. No, very, very quiet. Yeah, I mean, I still, from the kind of start of the process when people would say to me, well, so obviously people want definitives, don't they? Who's staying, who's going? And it's like, well, I'm sorry, there's just too many grey areas there to make any sweeping kind of predictions. But, from the start, I said, Van Dijk would be the one out of the three I was most confident would still be at Liverpool next season, and I still believe that. Virgil's given nothing away. He fronts up and speaks to the media after every single game, and inevitably his future keeps on coming up. Yeah, he plays the straightest of straight bats, and but you look at the level he's performing at, and just how important he is in so many ways, not just as an elite centre back, but as the leader and the real role model and talismanic leader in the dressing room. I still think that one will get done. Salah is a different one because I think the numbers with the Salah one are obviously on a different level. I don't see Salah going anywhere else in Europe. I just don't think there's another European club who would get close to what he will be looking for from his next contract. So I think Salah's pretty much got a choice between Saudi or signing the extension at Liverpool. Again, all parties have remained so tight-lipped through this that and again, I think that's part. It can become a frustration with fans because lots of people say to me, "Well, just give them what they want," and it's like, "Well, that's not how our business works. There's a negotiating process." And then other people say, "Well, why are they lowballing them?" And it's like, "Well, we don't know that because we don't know what figures are on the table. We don't know what they're asking for." So I think Salah has got a big decision there, which is, does he want to stay and cement his legacy as one of the greatest players in Liverpool's history and keep rewriting the record books? Or, if it's the money side of things that really drive him, then of course it will be Saudi, because Liverpool aren't going to be able to compete with the kind of numbers that will be on the table from there. So I think that's the straight choice for him. I think the other thing with Virgil, just going back to him, that kind of makes me confident is there's no whisper, is there, of any other club, which I think is a positive sign. And then of course Trent is very different because we know the lure of Real Madrid, and I think even going back to the start of the season, he was the one that there was the most concern about, because when you let someone coming into the peak years of their career get down to their last year, you are running a huge risk. That's again, when stories have come up that it's done, he's 100% off, he's decided. The feedback I've had is that no, there is no definitive decision yet. It's hold fire. It's not. The process is not complete. But of course, I think common sense tells you that every single week that goes by, it is more likely that he will leave. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, because I want Trent Alexander-Arnold to stay at Liverpool for the rest of his career. I'd love to see him do that. But of course, when you take a step back, you think, well, the chance to experience a new lifestyle, to live in Madrid, be part of that, be part of that club. We know, his friendship with Bellingham has been well documented. So, going back to Trent against Man United, I just think he's had so much going on in his head that I wouldn't be surprised if his mind was a bit frazzled, because there is a lot there to comprehend. And I think if he does go, then it's going to be interesting what kind of legacy he's kind of regarded as having, because he's given Liverpool so much and won the biggest things with them, and it could be the dream farewell, really, if the next few months goes to plan. But of course, there would be that feeling of if only, because he's gone at a point where he's still got so much left to offer. No,
absolutely, yeah. You're right. He was always the most complicated one, it felt like, in so many ways, because obviously, as you said, he's coming into the best years. Like with Salah and Van Dijk, their levels remain absolutely phenomenal, like through the roof. But there is a sense that Salah keeps proving me wrong on this, but maybe the best years are behind them potentially. But with Trent, it's like, you really need to keep him, because, he's future captain material. I want to touch on the leadership element of this in a moment for Cam, but whilst we're on the subject, you said the sources and people close to this remain tight-lipped. From Liverpool's standpoint and Liverpool's standpoint alone, I guess the latest is that there's still, hope, and there's still, they're still pushing and trying to get all three tied down.
Yeah. That's the message from the club, that they are, that certainly when there's been stories that there's been stories in Spain, hasn't it, that Liverpool have given up on keeping Trent or whatever, and Liverpool have pushed back on that. Again, they have remained very tight-lipped throughout the process with all three players, apart from just when there has been stories that have come out. I think that going back a couple of months, I think one of the Sunday papers, I think, didn't they had that Salah's deal was done and he was on the brink of signing, and again said, well, that is just not, it's not true. The process is ongoing, and that obviously people want a satisfactory conclusion and a breakthrough, but at the moment that is the stance that this process is still there. But I think it has to. We do need some clarity soon, because I think the club need clarity, because it's just going to have such a huge implications for what they do in the transfer market this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll touch on sort of the summer, because it's been spoken about more frequently of late. Arne himself has used that sort of phrase a couple of times in terms of summer transfer plans. But you're right, obviously, because it will have such a bearing on it. And not just in terms of the quality on the pitch, but we're talking about the captain, vice-captain, and certainly one of the leadership group in Salah. So It's not just actually the output in terms of the numbers and their performance. It's actually what it means to the football club more generally. And also, there's so much going on. We spoke before we went into this show about what could happen potentially this summer. The last thing you want is that clouded by uncertainty when it comes to those three players. So it's a really interesting one. Hopefully comes to a positive conclusion, of course. Spin it back around to the last few days of this transfer window now. We're going to touch on some potential loan exits. We're going to start, feels like a quite unnatural place to start, but one who almost certainly won't be going anywhere, in part due to his performance the other night, looks like James McConnell, because Arne Slot basically came out and said post that he ain't moving. He was really good ultimately, but are you surprised to hear that means he's just now sticking around for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I do wonder whether Liverpool might still look at a loan for him. I think because I think what Arne Slot was, he was just making the point. He was so good. I want to keep him, but I think maybe it was one of them ones where it was maybe lost in kind of it being his second language a bit, that because he kind of went on to say, but of course we have to look at the overall picture for these youngsters. And I really like McConnell. I think from the moment he started getting an opportunity last season, when the injury crisis was probably at its height, fearless, really combative in the tackle. Uses the ball intelligently, and he would have gone out on loan back in August, but for the injury that he suffered. So I still think he should go out on loan, really, because I think as well as he did the other night, and I thought him and Chiesa were probably the two biggest positives to come out of it. I just kind of look at it and I think, well, yeah, you definitely want him at Plymouth away, but what after that? Because if and then it kind of depends who you get after Plymouth, if you get past that. And it's like, are you really keeping him around for the second half of the season to play a couple of FA Cup games? Because it's and of course there is a balance to be struck, because you don't, Slot and Richard Hughes obviously don't want to leave themselves short. But yeah, I still think he would benefit from I know there's half a dozen Championship clubs been sniffing around him, and if he was to go to one of them and play 15 Championship games between now and the end of the season, I think that would probably benefit him more than sticking around. Yeah,
I think you're doing the world of good, and I'm with you actually for what it's worth. And it's interesting because you mentioned the FA Cup game there, and I think there will be a likelihood that he would feature at Plymouth, but then even the next one's draw dependent. Because if you get Chelsea away, the likelihood is he might even feature in that. So all of a sudden you're condemning him is not the word, but it kind of is, to under 21s footy for the rest of the season, when clearly, judging on his evidence to do tonight, he's ready for more than that ultimately. Next one I want to touch on, somebody else who falls into that similar category actually, is Tyler Morton. Just a bit of a crossroads really at the minute, Tyler. He spoke obviously post Accrington about a decision time and maybe the need to go out and get a loan. Obviously, as we sit here right now, that hasn't materialised yet. He does probably need that more than anyone, I'd say.
Yeah, you do wonder whether it'll probably be one or the other out of Morton and McConnell, similar types. So I'd be surprised if Liverpool were to lose both of them, just because that there's kind of he's got numbers, but not a huge amount in that midfield department, especially with Curtis still being out at the moment. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Tyler Morton, because I think whenever he has played this season, he's done really well. I know, and I got no doubt he's got a a really, really good career ahead of him. Even I think was it Southampton where he just kind of slotted in at right back, and it's even the other night, he makes a goal saving block, and he's I think he has been unfortunate just where he's fallen kind of in the pecking order, because he's almost, go back to the start of the season and it was almost like, well, he's probably not going to play, but we also don't want to lose him because he's almost like the insurance policy if we were to lose a few midfielders to injury. And Liverpool turned down, he could have been playing regularly for Leverkusen. Leverkusen wanted him on loan, but Liverpool were like, no, we're not going to sanction another loan. I think it was 20 million they were after. If you want to buy him, no one was prepared to put up that kind of money. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of interest there is in Tyler in the last couple of days. But, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it was either him or McConnell that goes rather than both. Yeah, interesting. The last one I'll touch on when it comes to potential loan exits is Jadon Danns. Now, obviously started the other night, albeit perhaps due to Darwin Nunez' illness, maybe wouldn't have done, but he's featured, obviously scores recently against Accrington, obviously back from quite a relatively long-term layoff at the start of the season. Been impressing in academy football as he so often does. It's a tricky one, this, because there'll be a hunger for him to play more football. Absolutely will. Certainly senior football at that. I think Arne Slot, from the outside looking in, looks like a fan. Yeah, where do you stand on this one? And obviously also, you said with McConnell, there's a lot of clubs potentially sniffing around, queuing up. I imagine the same will go for Jadon Danns. Yeah. I think it is a really tricky one. That's why I wasn't surprised to hear Slot earlier saying we're going to leave it to the last minute, I think he said, because, and I'm sure part of that with Danns is probably looking at Jota over the next couple of days, and is he definitely over that issue, the muscle issue he had, because of course Jota's had so many issues fitness wise during his Liverpool career, and I think if you think Jota's okay, then I think common sense says you should definitely loan Danns out, but suddenly if you were to lose Jota, and we know that Darwin, yes, he's capable of fireworks like he showed at Brentford, but is he really gonna be able to deliver what you need on a consistent, regular basis? And Danns is a natural goal scorer. You only have to look at the way in which he impacts games. He has a knack of being in the right place at the right time. So, yeah, I think that's a real tricky one. I think for his development, 100% he needs a loan. And again, like McConnell, he would have gone out on loan in the first half of the season. I think Plymouth were really keen at the time, obviously, when Rooney was down there. Mm-hmm. Injury put paid to that. So yeah, it's I'd say that's a real dilemma for Slot and Hughes, because you don't want to hold him back. But by the same token, if you were to loan him out and then Jota gets another muscle injury, he's out for a month, Nunez endures another crisis of confidence, you'd be looking at that bench thinking, if only we had Jadon Danns to chuck on for 15 minutes. I'm in a remarkably similar boat, because I'm very torn on Jadon Danns. I want to see him go and just play football ultimately, you know what I mean? And that's not, with all due respect, in the Premier League too. As much as I like watching him down there, I want to see him play Championship footy, because he's ready for that, in my opinion, and get a load of goals under his belt and then come back in the summer, and then he's a real part of the conversation. But at the same time, for the betterment of Liverpool, I'd quite like him to stick around as well. So it's going to be a fascinating one for the last couple of days. Just want to quickly touch on two that are out on loan, and their stories have kind of evolved over recent weeks for various reasons. Stefan Bajcetic will address dead quickly first. Obviously spent the first half of the season on loan at Red Bull Salzburg, was with Pep Landers for a short time, now not, of course. Looks like he's heading back to Spain and Las Palmas. How's that story kind of played out? Yeah, it's been interesting, actually, because certainly when stories came up about Bajcetic's loan at Salzburg being cut short earlier in January, Liverpool were adamant that no, that's not true. I think Real Betis was mentioned in terms of he's going to Betis, and Liverpool were like, absolutely not true. It's not happening. And then when I spoke to people a bit more about that, it was like, well, actually, there's a financial implication, because Salzburg have paid a hefty loan fee for the whole season. Their deal with Liverpool kept Bajcetic until after the Club World Cup in, I think, June, July this summer. So. And Liverpool's stance was, okay, yeah, he hasn't played, he hasn't made 20 starts. I think 19 appearances all in, only 8 starts. But they were like, but we never intended him to be, playing 90 minutes after 90 minutes after 90 minutes consistently because of the injury issues he's had. And also they made the point that part of a young player's development is having to fight through difficult periods and win over a manager. So yes, Pep had gone and a new manager had come in, but it was like, well, go on. That's what happens. That you could go on to another club and that could happen to you, next month. So, dig in, fight hard and prove that you should be a regular. But I think what changed over the course of this week is that Salzburg actually, having the new manager, having, made a proper assessment, has decided, well, actually, he is going to be down the pecking order. Stefan himself has been keen to get away. I think, I was told he had the choice of Porto or Las Palmas, who are based in Gran Canaria, and he's gone for a little stint in Gran Canaria, which I don't blame him for, to be honest. So yeah, it's I think clearly there'd been some kind of financial agreement with Liverpool and Salzburg, which meant they could terminate the loan. And I think Las Palmas are like 15th in La Liga, so we go in there. You'd like to think he can play regularly between now and the end of the season, come back and prove to Slot that he should be part of his plans for next season. Yeah,
he's going to have to do that. Yeah, and obviously Liverpool, we played Las Palmas, didn't we, on the double-header pre-season, so there's a pre-existing relationship of sorts with that football club, so maybe that's helped grease the wheels a touch. It's too soon to say on Stefan whether he's lived up to expectations or not, because they were very high, of course, post-spell in the side, but he could really do with this loan working, it feels like. I'm a big fan of his, but that also remains true. Just finally, in terms of this particular topic, James, Ben Doak saying at Middlesbrough, which in of itself is a non-story, but when you consider there was Crystal Palace interest, there was seeing the Ipswich interest. Yeah, a very deliberate decision maybe by Liverpool to keep him at Middlesbrough, rather, where he's been having a very good season.
Yeah, I think a case of looking at the bigger picture, really, because I think for a start, Liverpool thought that, I think it was 15, 16 million pounds they were offered by Palace and Ipswich. And they thought, well, actually, when you look at kind of similar deals for talented young wingers like that, you'd probably need to double those numbers to get close to what Liverpool would deem a suitable, fair valuation. So yeah, there was never any real. I never got the impression there was any chance he was going to be recalled to actually come back to Liverpool. I think it was just a case of, is there going to be an offer that's just too good to turn down this month? And up to this point, there hasn't been. I don't think there will be now. I think Liverpool are really happy with the way that he's been handled at Middlesbrough. Been one of the standout young players in the Championship. They've got a good relationship with Michael Carrick, good relationship with Jonathan Woodgate, who of course worked for Liverpool previously. So yeah, I think that's one where it will be assessed again in the summer. And I think from a business point of view as well, if Doak continues to do what he's been doing, that value will only rise between now and the summer, and then everyone will have to sit down and go, right, is he now ready to be part of Liverpool's plans? And of course, who knows, there could be a gap on that right hand side if Mo goes to Saudi. So does he move on? In which case, I think Liverpool will be in a position where they command a much bigger fee than what Palace and Ipswich were willing to pay this month. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, he's developing really nicely there. I've seen bits of him. He's been pulling up trees somewhat as such a young lad still, of course. In the Championship, he's a hell of a league too. Just finally, James, before I let you go, the summer, there seems to be a growing sense and sort of a growing feeling around the journos, the press pack, etc., that the noises coming out are that Liverpool have very much got their eyes already firmly fixed on the summer and planning for that. Arne Slot himself was spoken about in the background. They're working on strengthening the squad for the summer. He went on to say that it would mean that for upcoming years we will challenge for every trophy, which of course is music to the ears of every Liverpool fan. But is that the sense you've got as well from sort of being around it and obviously the noises and stuff like that?
Yeah. I think there was always a sense that summer 2025 would be really important because of, and again, we haven't got the clarity yet in terms of exactly what needs to be done, but, potentially, and again, I really still am hopeful that Van Dijk will stay, but imagine if you have to go and get, an elite centre-back, if you have to go and get another right-back, because as good as Conor Bradley is, he's not enough at right back. You're going to need, at the very least, you're going to need to bring someone in to compete with him.
Yeah.
And then if you're losing one of the most potent attacking forces still in world football, that isn't going to come cheap. So, and then you've got, the left back debate. You've also probably got a debate about, do they need another centre back, depending on, what happens with, is Joe Gomez gonna stay? Will Konate sign his new contract? Can Kwanzaa get back to where he was previously? And then in midfield you've got the, do they need a plan B that's kind of more similar to Gravenberch in terms of a profile for a number 6? So suddenly, there's a lot there, and at the minute there's a lot of moving parts without too much clarity. But I think you can look at that and go, well, actually, yeah, common sense tells you it's going to be a busy summer, and that is why it is so important to the club, the fact that being back in the Champions League, and I think it was I think it was out there yesterday. I think it was £85 million they banked in terms of the competition so far. That figure's only going to rise, and that will be important because that every penny that's generated goes back into the club. And of course, Liverpool, their accounts for 23-24 haven't come out yet. I know we had the Deloitte report that came out recently, but when the accounts do come out, kind of back end of February, there will be a quite a significant loss, which will lay bare the kind of the cost of being outside of the Champions League. So the success of this season and like the revenues that drives, I think everything points to it being quite a busy summer for Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And as you say there are so many possibilities, but it's good to hear that Liverpool are at least starting to plan for potentially every single eventuality, because, there's a lot of, as you say, a lot of moving parts, a lot of conversations around even some places where we might be well stocked. Is that the answer? Is that upgradable? Is that what Arne Slot wants? And also, Arne Slot will have had a year, more or less, give or take, working with his squad now. He's evaluated what he does and doesn't have at his disposal. Yeah, all points towards a busy all summer, which keeps us busy. Keeps us busy. Top man, thank you so much for joining me. Massively appreciated. Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. I'll see you soon.